Hi guys, we're having some fun with the Syil X7 here, trying to prove out some roughing recipes for 6061 aluminum, or probably any grade of aluminum would be pretty close to this. This isn't, we're probably pushing it a little bit harder than you would actually want to do within the context of a program, but we're just trying to find the limits and see what we can get away with. But we have a 1/2 inch 3 flute end mill. It's a Titan USA end mill. Installed in a Meritol roughing hydraulic holder, and I know hydraulics probably aren't the best tool holder for this application, but it's the best I got. It's better than an ER, call it, so that's what I'm running. Here's the piece of work. I've been stepping across, trying to different speeds and feeds, and kind of inching my way into it. I'm not, I started low and I'm working my way up, and I think I've kind of found a solid recipe here. But the program, we're side milling, we're just zipping across the part. It's my start position and my Y coordinate. I've been adding, my width of cut to like my previous position. So I added 75 thousandths to my previous cut, so you'll have to take my word for that. We're going a 1/2 inch deep, 300 inches per minute feed rate at 10,000 RPM, which is a surface footage of 1310, and an inch per tooth of 10 thousandths. That doesn't account for chip thinning, so in actuality it's probably a little bit less than that. I punched all these parameters into Machining Doctor calculator that's on the internet there, and it's telling me that this on paper should be a 5.2 horsepower cut with a material removal rate of 11.26 cubic inches per minute. So let's see how it does. And ideally, you'd want to run coolant, but it's kind of difficult to film with all that splashing around. So here we go. Maybe a little bit of bogging there towards the end, so we're probably approaching the limits of what we should be running if you were going to be, having an end mill in an adaptive roughing strategy for longer than what I just showed there. But it's just a baseline. We're just testing, right? And I've made a bunch of different cuts, and if we look at the tool, it's still looking like pretty much like new. This is a new end mill when I put it in, and we're not seeing any degradation yet. So I don't know. This thing's cool, man. We're having fun. I'll put up another clip, take another run across, and I'll put the camera on the spindle load so you can see that. All right, so here we go. We're taking another clip here, the same exact cut, same parameters. You'll be able to watch the spindle load meter as it goes across. All right, entering the cut. So yeah, it looks like it peaked around 25 or 26%. This is the 8.2 kilowatt spindle, so I guess the horsepower demand estimate that I punched into the calculator might not be exactly right, because we would have been expecting closer to 50% if it was actually a 5.2 horsepower cut. So I don't know about that one.
A few moments later.
All right, guys, I'm following on to that previous clip because now I've had a little bit more time to think about it. I was making a lot of incorrect assumptions about what was happening, what was causing the spindle to start to lose RPM. Like I said, the estimates from that Machine Doctor calculator are probably a little optimistic for what we were actually doing. A better estimate would probably be 0.3 to 0.4 horsepower per cubic inch of material removed in aluminum. Our material removal rate for that particular cut was 11.26. So if we multiply that by 0.3, we're probably closer to a 3.3 horsepower cut. And that explains why we didn't get to 50% on the load meter for the spindle, right? We peaked around 25, 26 before it started dropping down to 20. So if we're at a 3.3 horsepower cut though, and we have 11 horsepower available, we have the max horsepower available at 10,000 RPM on this machine, why were we still losing spindle RPM? And the key thing to think about is, horsepower is just one component of this. Torque is the other. So, like, very rough definitions, torque is a rotational force. Horsepower is just a rotational force available per unit time. So foot-pounds per second is the rough estimation. 1 horsepower is 550 foot-pounds per second. And on this machine, so the torque ramps up, it plateaus for a little while, and then it starts to taper off. And the faster you spin it, the less torque that you're going to have available. So in this case, our theory is that the torque required for this cut was such that it was causing the spindle to bog. And the question from here is, okay, if we had left the tool in the cut for a longer amount of time, it was in the material for less than a second before it exited. If we had left it in the cut for longer, either we have a bigger piece of stock, or we have an adaptive strategy where it's circling around the part with uniform engagement for a longer amount of time. Would the spindle have had enough time to catch back up with that requirement and restore the RPMs that were lost, or would it continue to bog? At which point, we probably know that we need to back off, because if you start to lose RPMs, that feed rate on your X and Y axes isn't going to stop, and your chip load will skyrocket to the point where you're going to start breaking tools and throwing your workpiece out of the vise. So you don't want that. But that's a test that we need to do. I'll back up and say, this is kind of the beauty of this trade, right? It's not just about how powerful your machine is. It's not just about reading the manufacturer data sheets for what that tool is supposed to be capable of with respect to surface feet and chip load. You need to put it in the context of the specific application that you're trying to do. So you need to get your tool, you need to get your tool holder, you need to look at your work holding, and then you need to calculate your cut and see where that falls on your horsepower torque chart for the machine. It's just because it works in Fusion doesn't mean it's going to work in real life. And this is probably very elementary 101 level stuff that guys think about almost secondhand, but as somebody new to it and discovering this for the first time, it's been kind of eye-opening to kind of try to link all these variables together. One thing I will say is, compared to other manufacturers, that the ratings for this machine with respect to horsepower and torque as a function of RPM have been very accurate, within a few percent of what's advertised. We even down low, we took a drill into a piece of steel that was supposed to be a little under 4 horsepower, and at that particular speed we had 4 horsepower available, and we were reading within a few percent of what their maximum was, 95, 96%. So that's something important to know, because a lot of manufacturers, they kind of fluff up their numbers. They'll give you a horsepower chart. They'll cook up, all their fancy plots at 200% load, It's kind of meaningless. It's like me saying my pickup truck makes 800 horsepower at 200% load. But how am I going to ever get it there, and how much time am I actually going to spend there? You know, the answer is probably next to zero. What matters is your 100% horsepower load. You need to make sure that's accurate so that, you know, you're buying enough machine, you're not wearing out tools prematurely, you're not throwing parts from the vise because you're bogging the spindle, and you know, like I said, it's going to continue to feed regardless of whether, you know, it says it has the horsepower and torque to do it or not. You know, you start to lose RPM and that's a problem. But back to our current situation. So how would I rectify this? It looks like I'm kind of at the limits for a standard end mill. What can I do to reduce the required torque for this cut? I could go to a chip breaker end mill that slices up my chips from, you know, the full length of the depth of cut to shorter pieces. So that reduces the torque, and maybe I don't lose RPM. Maybe I can go a little bit deeper, go a little bit wider, and still feed at the same rate before I start to reach these same kind of limitations. So there's always a knob to turn. That's where the attention to detail and the creativity comes into play with this thing, and that's what, at least for me, that's what keeps it fresh and interesting. But you know, I would encourage anybody, and that's going to be a common trend with, as I progress into this and I'm learning stuff. You know, I'm a new guy, I'm just trying to figure it out. That's going to be a common discussion point is, you know, what are the requirements of the cut? What is the machine capable of? And then kind of working within those parameters to try to maximize what I have at my disposal here. So, I mean, that's a good thing to think about for anybody, regardless if you're running a, you know, a little desktop router, or you're running a, you know, a big ass 80 horsepower, you know, 9-axis machine. You need to keep it in between the yellow lines, so to speak. But yeah, this is kind of long-winded diatribe, but I think it's a good discussion point. So if you're still here and you're still watching, thank you. I'll be coming out with more content here soon. So thank you.